It's 2026 and the feature you didn't expect to come back, it's controllers with handles. The controller I have here is a leverless controller, but is bringing back a feature that used to be actually fairly common on arcade sticks because they were big and heavy. We actually have this leverless controller, which isn't heavy, but it's nice and weighty, metal construction, and it also has this handle, which reminds me a little bit of electric guitars in the 80s, like the Steve Vai models. Do guitars need handles? Not really. Do leverless controllers need handles? Not really. But the main features of this controller aren't really just the handle, it's the rugged metal construction, the fact that it has 17 buttons that you can assign as you like, and actually one really cool feature, a little dongle for wireless compatibility. Let me just punch my microphone. There's not as many leverless controllers out there with wireless, and this has Bluetooth and a Wi-Fi dongle, but the question is it worth the asking price of $179? Let's find out with the Mojhon Fight Master. Just want to point out here at the start that this controller was sent to me for the purposes of making this video. I don't have to say anything specific about it. I don't have to send it back at the end, and of course, all opinions are my own. Alright, as you can see, I've got Street Fighter 6 booted up here, but the controller itself is not plugged in yet. So let's talk about the wireless compatibility, which is one of the headline features on this controller, in addition to just being a very rugged metal controller with a handle built into it. It can be used as a regular leverless controller by plugging in the cable. If I plug this in like so, you'll see a little pulsing red light here, which I believe shows that it is charging, but there is an on-off switch. Then if I just switch it to on like so, it goes from the charging red light to a green light here, and you can see that we are now able to control the character plugged into a PC, though you can also use it on Android, iOS, Switch, and Switch 2. So I'll just switch the controller off again. See, it's gone back to charging with this pulsing red light. Going to switch the controller on, and then I'm going to press the wireless button here, and you'll see another green light here. It's the same green light flashing until it has connected, and it is now connected to my computer with Bluetooth. So just to show you that it works like this, I can do all the same things I was doing before. I actually tested the lag on the wired, wireless, and Bluetooth connections, and all of them seem to have pretty much the same low latency. Didn't experience any unusual lag in the wired mode, and I believe that the wireless modes, in my testing, I noticed that it varied from having either no lag at all or like half a frame of lag or so. So that's good news if you want to actually use the controller wirelessly and maybe in a tournament as well. But the final thing we want to test out is the Wi-Fi dongle. So if I just switch the controller off again with this on-off switch, you flip the controller over, and you can actually see the dongle is hidden inside the controller, which is really nice. So I don't even have to open it up, just slide it out of here from this little USB hole. I take this USB-A dongle and plug it into my computer. And then in order to activate the dongle mode, you actually have to switch away from X input mode to D, which I thought maybe meant like digital or something, but actually means D for dongle. Once you're in dongle mode, switch the controller on, press the Wi-Fi button, and instead of green, it will now flash blue. This will show that you're using it in wireless mode with the dongle, and again, just as before, I can do all of my attacks like so, but now using the wireless dongle, this is obviously going to be significantly more convenient if you don't like Bluetooth pairing, which honestly, I hate Bluetooth pairing, so every time I can use a dongle instead, I much prefer that. But of course, sometimes your device doesn't make sense to have a dongle, especially if you're playing on iOS or Android, in which case probably Bluetooth is your friend. If I switch the controller off again, pull the dongle out, I can just store it right back where I took it from and connect to the controller once again with this nice braided gray USB cable that comes with it. Switch it on, and we're good to go. Now let's talk about the design of this controller. As you can see, it is not the smallest leverless controller around, but it's also not the biggest. You know, it's just enough bigger than a regular controller that it has space for this handle, which inadvertently gives you also a little space to rest your palms. A slightly bigger controller could also be nice if you prefer to have your legs spread slightly further apart when you play. And in addition to the shape of the controller, you can also see that construction-wise, it's made out of metal, aluminum, which makes it actually nice and heavy, which is good because it keeps it more stable, but at the same time, it's going to be a bit of a hassle to carry this around. To be honest, I think it feels a little bit heavier than a MacBook. It's kind of weighty. So being weighty, not completely necessary for a leverless controller, but actually one thing I would have liked to see is more non-slip padding on the base, because what we have here, weirdly, is non-slip padding all over the bottom, but it's actually not non-slip. It's just slippery. It's just slippery padding. Even when I was just like playing with the controller like this, because I had my palms resting on the controller, I did feel like it was moving around quite a lot while I was playing. Then in terms of buttons, we've got the movement buttons here on the left, action buttons here on the right, and they call these buttons here the mapping buttons, which is why they don't have anything written on them. You can map them to anything you want, and there are 5 of them. Personally, I've mapped this button here to be jump, but if you're playing a game where you prefer WASD controls, then you could also have this button be a jump button instead. And you don't actually need to use special configuration software. You can map on the fly. If you want to map this button to be down instead of jump, you could press down, the mapping button, and the function button, and then this now becomes a down button. There's one bizarre quirk, which I'll explain a bit later, and it's that you can't unmap a button completely. I'm sure that they could fix this in the firmware, but at this current time, when you go into the configuration software, there's no way to actually just completely unmap a function of a button, which means depending on which tournament you're going to, it might not be tournament legal to have 2 jump buttons. So I set this one to pause, and what I've done is if I just use the tournament lock switch here, which is the orange button, you can see that it actually locks off this button because it thinks that this is a start menu button. So yeah, I'll show you the configuration software a little bit later and explain all the different quirks of it. Generally speaking though, I've got my left, right, down, and jump, and I've got my 3 punch buttons, and I've got my 3 kick buttons. I'm actually not using my L button and L trigger or for anything, but I've got these 2 buttons mapped here to L3, which is my drive impact, and this button over here, which is parry, so that I can do things like drive rush. Now in terms of button feel, this is actually not a feel that I'm completely used to, because it feels a little bit more like a gamer keyboard. They call it gasket construction. I don't really understand what the gasket part is about, but I think it kind of softens the buttons. It doesn't actually make them silent, but it kind of makes it feel a bit more like a gamer keyboard. So some people may like that, and I'm not too opposed to it, but one thing I did find a bit strange is the feel of these buttons. Now they've got a very, very slight matte texture to them. It's not rough or anything. It's a nice matte texture, but personally, there's something about this plastic that I'm not a big fan of. They call it PBT, and I guess it's some kind of nylon material. Whatever it was, I didn't really like it as much as having a more hard plastic. Definitely not a deal breaker, but just something I wanted to point out. So you've got movement, action, and these M buttons, but you may have also noticed that the shape of the M buttons are all in that long pill shape. So we've got one pill button here on the left, which is actually quite useful because it's nice and easy to press if you're using that for drive impact, which on this occasion I'm not. And I've also got these giant pill buttons down here, which actually makes perfect sense, especially as you're going to be playing it with your thumb, and your thumb actually comes down sideways. And I actually quite like this layout because you may remember the Key Brawler, which was a controller I tested out, that had a pill button here and a pill button here. So this is just one of those really subtle things that's different between the leverless controllers. Like, I've got a pill button here, or I've got a pill button here, or I've got 2 separate buttons here. Now, something you can't really see here until I tilt the controller like this is that actually each of these button caps has a different shape. On the movement buttons, it's got a kind of convex shape, but it's flattened off right in the middle. On the right side for the action buttons, we've got more of a convex-ish shape, but mostly flat. And then on the L1 and L2 buttons, actually, they are very similar to the rest of the action buttons, but they've got a bit of a dimple, so it goes concave on the top of these 2 buttons only. And then for all of these M buttons, they've also got a slight convex shape around the edges, but in the middle they've got that dimple where it goes concave. And I'm going to be really honest with you, in gameplay I kind of didn't really notice, though that could be a good thing. It means that it's subtle enough that it's not kind of jarring. It's subtle, doesn't get in the way, who can complain, right? Now I want to show you the control panel on this controller because the buttons are organized in a bit of a bizarre way. First of all, as you can see, it's near impossible to see what the functions of these buttons are unless you look really closely. That's a little box with an arrow coming out of it. L3, R3, there's a Wi-Fi. This one's easier to see. You can see the Wi-Fi icon on here. That's when you want to tell it to pair. Also happens to be the home button. Moving over to the right side, however, this is a little bit more complex. We've got the X, D, and S, which are X input on the left, switch on the right, and D for dongle. So it's kind of a platform switching button, but in the middle it's also a dongle activation button, which is kind of confusing. And then if you're emulating an analog stick, you've got left stick, right stick, or digital input. Of course, it doesn't give you analog input. It's just, you know, if you've got a game that needs you to like press left on the analog stick. Then we've got the on-off switch, obviously, because this is a controller with a battery. I really love that this controller does have an on-off switch. Sometimes these wireless controllers, they're like, okay, if you just like flick it to the mode in the middle where it's not the wireless setting, that's technically off. It's really annoying when you've got an electronic device and there's no actual on-off switch. So really glad that there's an on-off switch here. And then the only button that's actually really nice and easy to see is the tournament lock switch. Flick that switch and then now start doesn't do anything. And even this button, which I've got mapped to my start button as well, that doesn't do anything either. So in terms of regular gameplay, I think there's everything to like about the feel of the controller. All the buttons are in the right place. I can put my palms on it if I want to. It's nice and cool. It's nice to have a metal controller that they are not as common these days. And if it matters to you, the controller does also have RGB, but as you can see, it's really just not very bright. Like, I think I've set the brightness fairly high, but you can really barely tell that there's light coming out of these buttons. Switch through the different light modes that we've got, phasing of different colors, some random colors, having the light kind of ripple across, or having the light kind of chase around in a circle. So those are the main features of the controller, but I want to draw your attention to some of the quirks. First of all, on this control panel, you can't really see what each button does, so you'll often find yourself kind of leaning forward and like trying to figure out what these buttons do. In addition to that, the options button is quite difficult to find. It's not this one here on the side, and it's not this one here on this side. It's actually second from the left. So every time you want to pause the game, you have to count 1, 2, and then find it here. It's the second one from the left. Now I've shown you that the buttons feel nice, but actually it comes with this special tool for cleaning out your ears. Just kidding, this is not an ear pick. It is in fact a key switch puller. You can just stuff it under here and pull out the keycaps. And you can also hot swap these key switches. These are Kale Ice Cream Mini switches, if you're familiar with how they feel. I think these switches do the job perfectly well, but what's really strange about this controller is that it actually comes with 3 spare switches, and they're completely different. These spare switches that they gave me, these are called Seika Mini. So I guess if you prefer Seika Mini switches, you can swap them out, but I guess you'll only be able to swap out 3 of them. Something that's a little bit difficult to pick up on just from the video is that these button caps are actually, they feel like they're a little bit higher than the average leverless controller coming out now. It is a little bit harder to do these like sliding techniques. I swap in one of these Seika Mini switches instead. I put a Seika Mini switch in this A button, and as you can see, it's actually quite dramatically lower than the other buttons. I think it's 1 millimeter shorter travel than the Ice Cream Mini switches, and it makes actually quite a big difference. And while we're on that topic, I have no issue with pressing 2 buttons like this at the same time. There are some controllers where this little bump in the middle, this ridge in the metal, can like bump up against your finger, making it hard to actually press both buttons at the same time. This controller doesn't have an issue with that. Also, with regards to the buttons, I have no issue double tapping them or anything, whether they've got the Seika Mini switch or the Ice Cream Mini switches in them. But while we're talking about the quirks of this controller, I do want to mention again that it's a shame that it doesn't have non-slip padding on the bottom. It does have padding, but it definitely is not non-slip. All right, now I want to show you the configuration software because it does have some quirks. I plugged myself in via the wired connection, and it says if you try to do the software update over here, if you try to do this with a wireless connection, it will crash and you could probably brick the controller, so don't try it. So there's a button down here that says upgrade tutorial must watch. That sounds quite important, right? I don't want to brick the controller. So if you click on this button, it opens up a website, controller/champion upgrade/404 not found. I feel like there's something important I'm supposed to be reading here and it's not here. So hopefully they can update the website and actually put the instructions here. Now we will talk about the lighting in a moment, but I want to draw your attention to the config panel. If you want the controller to be tournament legal, and if they require that you can't have 2 up buttons on your controller, you're probably going to have to go into the configuration. So I created this custom configuration, but I'll just make a new one to show you. You probably want to have an up button here, so I'll set M2. That will be map to up. That's totally fine. And then I want to unmap this button, which is up. Unfortunately, when you click up over here, there's just no button over here called null. So what I found is that the only way to set this to not be up is to set it to one of these buttons here. And what I ended up doing was setting it to the start button. Even if up is set to the start menu, if I put the tournament lock switch on, now any buttons that are set to start menu also become deactivated. So kind of annoying that you can't just nullify a button as it is, but again, this seems like a firmware thing. Hopefully they can just update that. If they do, hopefully I can let you know in a pinned comment or something. And finally, in this configuration software, you can also change the lighting. So the English on some of these Chinese controllers can be a little bit confusing. Footsies, I think what they're talking about is these movement buttons over here. So if I change the footsies color, I can change the movement buttons on the left to be a different color. Then if I click on the mapping buttons, you can change the color of that separately as well. And then the fight buttons, which is what they're calling them on the right side, you can have a color for all of these. But I just cannot find a way to change these colors individually. Some quirks with the configuration software, but hopefully those will get fixed. So that's pretty much everything I have to say about the Mojhon Fightmaster leverless controller. There are some obvious features here that do make sense. First of all, metal construction, the handle is nice and convenient, it does have lighting on it, and it's got 17 buttons that you can pick and choose and put the functions wherever you like. So it has all the bases covered, and on top of that, it's a wireless controller as well. So battery inside, which is also part of the reason why it probably feels so heavy. And in my very minimal testing, it doesn't seem to add a lot of lag to it, maybe 0 to half a frame on average. But I think my main conclusion with the Mojhon Fightmaster is that at $179, although that's not breaking the bank, it's definitely on the more expensive end of these leverless controllers. And remember, even at $179, it's not compatible with PlayStation. It's not an officially licensed controller for PS5. This is still a PC, Switch, Switch 2, or Android and iOS controller. So maybe if this controller were just over $100, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I don't mind spending a little bit more than the cheapest controllers to get, you know, wireless functionality, battery built in. But if they really want to charge $179 for this, they definitely need to spruce up the software and make sure that it is just perfect. That being said, from holding the controller and actually using it, you can tell that the hardware is all kind of set. Like, they've got everything that they need going here. And actually, I really like these Seiko mini switches. I kind of wish they had sent it to me with Seiko mini switches in all the buttons. I don't really understand why they sent me the ice cream mini switches and only 3 of these Seiko minis as separate options. Hopefully that's not how they actually sell the controller. They just let you choose all Seiko mini or all ice cream mini. But other than that, I would say that in general, it's a pretty good controller. It does pretty much everything I want, and it's kind of nice to have a slightly different feel. Weightier with this handle and with the wireless connectivity. I just think that at the price that they're asking, $179, the software definitely needs to be spruced up a bit. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments of the Mojhon Fightmaster controller. They make a bunch of pad controllers as well. I think maybe this is their first foray into leverless controllers. Hardware-wise, I think we're there. We just need to work on the software. Hopefully they actually do update these things, and I can let you know in a pinned comment. Anyway, I've been NihongoGamer. I hope you've enjoyed this review and it's given you some food for thought. That's all for today. I'll see you real soon.